Firstly, it's wonderful to see so many people here excited about the Otago Central Rail Trail here for our webinar. We've got Simon, who's joining us from Clyde, and
Hey
he'll
guys.
be running through the webinar today. So the way it's going to work, we're going to have about 30 minutes or so, give or take a few minutes, going through the webinar that Simon's created, all about the Otago Central Rail Trail. And then after that, we'll have about a 15-minute time frame to ask any questions you like. You can also ask questions by putting them in the chat if you'd like, in that little chat section. And then we'll do our best at answering them at the most appropriate time. So we've got different slides throughout this webinar that will talk about different aspects of the Otago Central Rail Trail. So hopefully we've answered all your questions, but yeah, if not, put them in the chat or you can wait till after we've finished the webinar and we'll have that Q&A section at the end. Hopefully that sounds all well. Simon, do you want to kick us off?
Welcome everyone. Sorry about the those of you in New Zealand. It's quite late. We got about the daylight saving on the weekend, so apologies for that. You Aussies are still fine. So I believe you go into daylight saving this coming weekend, I think. So to 2 hours, hopefully. So get started. And don't mind questions as we go along. If anyone's got questions that relate to this slide we're looking at, dive onto the website and just have a little look at a few things as well as we go. And we'll kick it off. So, and fully support the Tiaki yes, commitment, New Zealand. We're very outdoorsy people, and this commitment's very much about the natural world around us and part of everything we do. Right, talking to someone through to actually our service. So, just as an aside, the logo here, the top one's the sky, the forest, the earth, and the bottom one's the ocean. So it represents all those things. In the webinar today, we'll talk about a little bit about the story behind the trail and how it came to be, some of the highlights on the trail, its grading and terrain, the weather that you can expect at different times of the year, various sort of accommodation, other than that you can tag on or add to your trip. Obviously, our bikes, and we provide, and a little bit about timings, your journey, and then some questions and that at the very end. So let's go off. So it was built to see, I guess, the grain and primary produce part of this part of New Zealand originally at the last century. You can see top picture there, some old diggers. They did the tunnels and built the viaducts with pick and axe and bullock basically. So it was a pretty hard life. In those days, in the winter, minus 21 degrees wouldn't be an odd. So and very hot summers. So it's certainly not the case these days. Um, so they built the trail. The Kiwis used it to transport produce from this part of the country, but also themselves in later years. But we're not great train travellers. Part of that reason is because the gauge of our railway lines in New Zealand, or the width of the railway line, is quite narrow, so we can't have fast trains, and they stop everywhere, and it's just not an efficient way to travel. So Clyde has a hydroelectric dam here, and it was commissioned in the 90s. And once that was finished, there was no need for the railway line. They didn't need to bring any goods to build that dam, which is quite large, New Zealand's third largest electricity generator. And they ripped the tracks up, and they sat there ripped up for a few years. The land, or the rail corridor itself, given to our Department of Conservation to look after. And an interesting fact, it has to be kept in a state that it can be turned back into a railway if the need ever arose. Certainly can't see that happening. So Trail Journeys was the company to start doing trips on this trail, purely, I guess, in a sense, by accident. So the gentleman Neil Neville, who started the business, had a mowers and shop in Alexandra, and people kept walking in and asking him if if they hike and ride that trail out there. And it turned out that there was a business opportunity. And then the Department of Conservation, along with other people in New Zealand, got together, and the local people, and it was made a very first ride in New Zealand. So it's 25 years old this year, this trail. So it's well sorted in terms of all those things that go at a good ride and a comfortable ride. It's 150 k's of trail. There's little places you can dive off to along the way that can add to that, but most people would do the 150 k's when they come here. So we, as a company, we have a number of branches or bases throughout the southern part of the South Island of New Zealand. So obviously Clyde, where I am, is our headquarters and central to all of the trails that exist in the region, really. We've got the Queenstown trails, the Dunstan, which people may have heard about, the Roxburgh and Clutha trails, which go down through Lawrence towards Dunedin. And then we also operate on the Alps Trail, and we're based in Omarama there. So Alps to Ocean is Mount Cook to Oamaru. So the rail trail itself goes from Clyde through Alex, just down here, and up through following State Highway 85 through to Middlemarch. So that's a summary or a picture of all the different trails. It's a fairly confused picture, that one. So I guess the point, the key things of this trail, that it really embraces what this is about. It brings in all those vineyards, the viaducts, the railway, the old railway, I guess, itself, and some really, really small towns, 30 people. And there's these towns. Clyde has 1,500 people and has a silver service restaurant through to a pub and a couple in between. So it's very well serviced in that sense. So the top picture that you're viewing there is Monte Cristo winery. So that winery has the oldest vines, Pinot Noir vines in New Zealand, bought in 1860 by a Frenchman. None of the grapes or the wine they produce these days are from those vines, but they do exist there. Just a couple of them around the back of the building. So in the picture down below, of course, is one of the viaducts that you would travel over. So there's lots of history. Predominantly, the region was a gold mining region in the 1860s. Queenstown, there's a street in Queenstown called Ballarat, got shot over. We have a place not far from here called Bendigo. So those same miners that came through from the US through Victoria and on to New Zealand, obviously named similarly as they went through. So our forebears, by and large, are Scottish, and so we have lots of burns in this part of the world, Bannock Burn, Wedderburn, which you ride through, and so on. So the trail itself, in the early days, was, if he knows what railway ballast is, the trail itself was pretty rough and big pieces of shingle. These days, what you're looking at there is pretty much the roughest it would be, and it's compacted shingle. They are working every year. They do probably 15 or 20 kilometres of the trail and resurface it. So it's maintained to a pretty high standard. We have a good relationship with the Department of Conservation and the trust that oversees the maintenance and use of the trail. So because it's an old line, trains could never go straight up a hill or straight down a hill. So it's very gradual and very suitable for people that don't ride and suitable for, families, little kids, that type of thing. 2 degrees, 1 meter every 50 is probably the gradient that you'd find on this trail. And it's very conducive to a good time. So you have different groups, might be a nana and pop, mum and dad and the kids, through to, sort of 8 couples having a good time. There's a pub every 15 or 20 Ks, some good food to go along with that. Most people these days would choose an e-bike. You can bring your own bike. These days, choosing e-bikes take the edge off. I guess part of our ethos at Trail Journeys is that we're not a hard out cycling company. We're an experience. We provide an experience and a great time for our customers. And so the bikes for us are that tool that get you along the way. So that's how we view it. The weather, this time of the year, we've had snow, not on the ground here in Clyde, but snow in the hills in the past week. So it can hit us, even though we're in spring, it can hit us at this time of the year. And in fact, we've actually had snow in January. But most of the time, you might expect winter. We've got frosty, clear skies. It's a bit warmer than that. It's actually probably -5 through to 0 on most of this trail. It's very clear and still. And so it is actually, if you're warm and rugged up, it's a really nice time to ride this trail. Spring, when we're in spring now, is great. The only downside with spring is probably a little bit of rain, and the wind is probably the worst thing at the time of the year. Um, Temperatures are somewhere around 0 degrees frost this up to about 14 degrees during the day. So that's what you could probably expect in the springtime. Um, can be a little bit changeable, the weather. So, the course of the year, we would only have or get just over a rain, or 400 mils of rain here. So, it's a very dry part of New Zealand, probably the driest and coldest and warmest part of New Zealand. So, summertime is very warm. The picture you're looking at there is actually quite green. It's not normally that green. Um, so summertime, we could get above 30 degrees, and a hot day. And as you can see in that picture, there's not a lot of shelter. So middle of summer, it tends to move. It seems to be moving towards February these days. Late January, February are quite warm days. So again, and we would say to people riding spring and in summer, get cracking fairly smartly in the morning to avoid either the heat or the wind. And in autumn, what everyone knows about the southern autumn down here, the colours are pretty amazing. So it's probably our busiest time and prettiest time in this area. All the colours autumn, but advanced to get, for instance, the accommodation that you really want. So, but we do have days where it can sunny, wet, cold, also particularly this time of the year. The accommodation on the trail is quite varied. So we've got, you can see there in the top left, pretty basic sort of accommodation or shared accommodation where people would share a bathroom in, for instance, in a house. Or you might have something better than that with an ensuite. The right-hand top picture is one of those. That's actually at Wedderburn. And then we have old period properties that have been done up and high level. Some of those, because of what they're and they're unique in New Zealand, are quite expensive. Usually with an ensuite and yeah, and attached maybe a tavern or as well. Picture at the bottom is actually Wedderburn. And they're a farming family who, in New Zealand, we have stations, very large farms. So they have a station, they farm sheep and beef, dairy, and then they have this accommodation facility for the rail clients. And they were the very critical farming family support the trail, and have a whole little village there for people to stay in. And the pub down the road is really good as well. Pretty much at the trail, Wedderburn, so it's above sea level, which isn't that high in this part of New Zealand, but it certainly is, and it will get snow in winter fairly regularly, but it goes fairly quickly too. I guess we've got book early peak season, so it's really these places are like capacity is limited in many of these places. If you really want something of good quality or a good experience, you might have heard that someone stayed somewhere and they said it was brilliant. Really think ahead. It's Easter and the school holidays particularly are the worst or busiest to get what you want. So in those situations, people really should be booking, a good 9 or even 12 months out to get what they really like. There's always other options, but they involve a vehicle or a drive somewhere, leaving your bike here, for instance, and then being driven to Naseby, which has curling and other things, and staying in Naseby. So there are a number of ways we can manipulate things to make it, but it does pay to book a time if you can. I guess larger also a little bit difficult at times. Central Otago wines are known for Pinot Noir, We have French, we've got Louis and the Rothschilds buying land in the general area, so it must be pretty good. And of places that you can incorporate into your bike ride. Not so on the rail trail, um, but more so, you probably would spend a day in Clyde so that you could experience the wineries. But certainly, if you were doing Lunston on the front of the rail trail ride, you could spend a day, spend some time in the wineries. The taverns are pretty much like they are in that picture at the bottom. They're a mixture, but old buildings, and you'll meet country folk. They do all the places cater for different food requirements, so vegetarian, pescatarian, all that sort of thing. But they are, steak. They're known for in this part of the country. Cheese rolls, which are also bad for the health, but good. So there's lots of if side trips which involve wine, involves but what you could probably most likely expect. It also the stone fruit, I guess, capital. We export bulk of our cherries, apple, not so much apples, but any stone fruit like apricots, that type of thing, but mainly cherries from this region. Christmas time's great to get a box of cherries, and they're golf ball size. There's some pretty good ones amongst them that would normally go for export. So yeah, there's always something going on, and also in spring this time of the year, got all the blossoms out. So we've just had a blossom festival here, which has been for 30, 40 years in Alexandra. I talked to just for a little bit about planning your journey. It's really important to lock down your numbers if you can, or the worst case scenario, and if we have to take some off, we can. If it's just a couple, it's not necessarily a major problem. It's just those groups. We can do private guided tours. So all our drivers are probably, most of them are 60 plus, but they're all ex-farmers or from this region, paramedics, bank school principals, and they all have a real passion. And they work for us is so they can speak to our customers because they just love that contact, and they're very proud about what they can show you. So private guided tours are a thing for us in that sense, or supported even. So actually having a full-on guide, but a vehicle that might support a group of 10, that's feasible. Getting here, most people think Queenstown's closest to it. It is. If they're going to do the Alps Ocean tour and want to do that first, Christchurch is not the closest. Queenstown is. So Queenstown's your main option. You could, as most people will ride the trail. If I go back, sorry, I'm going to dive out of this window and go. Most people will ride the trail in the direction from the green from Clyde through to Middlemarch. Hopefully, you can all see that. And that's because the prevailing wind is a nor'wester coming this way, and it's behind you. So when you get through here down into the Rock and Pillar area, it can be quite windy. So we tend to ride that way. You can never be certain it's going to that way, but that's the general direction. So people will fly into Queenstown. We pick them up. So we're in Queenstown usually 2 or 3 times a day. We'll pick them up, bring them through to Clyde, either stay a night in Clyde a day, maybe tack on Lake Dunstan ride at the beginning, and then ride through doing the rail trail through to Middlemarch. And of course, that's close to Dunedin. So I know Jetstar from Brisbane at least fly out of and into Dunedin. So you can fly into Queenstown, ride the trail, catch a train. I'll talk about that shortly, and then go home from Dunedin. So Dunedin's a Gaelic word for Little Edinburgh. So the architecture in Dunedin is quite different to the rest of New Zealand, and in fact was touted to be the capital city of New Zealand at one point, but it never happened. So that's sort of how we would run the trail. You can ride it in about 10% of our clients would ride it in reverse for various reasons. It doesn't really matter. The logistics in terms of our bag movements and all things run in this direction. If we're going back the other way, it's usually on the return journey, so the bags can turn up a little later. Excuse me while I just kick on through this. So yeah, most people into Queenstown, maybe out of Dunedin, um, and or they can drive down from if they really want to as well. Guess our trips include on the website, and I'll dive onto the website shortly, but they include hire accommodation, your luggage transfer moved every day. We can store luggage as well. So if you're here to do other things in New Zealand, you can put bags in storage and just have a smaller bag. As you can see in that picture, all the bikes have panniers. So I'm out with panniers, which would hold a small backpack on each side, and they're like a dry bag, so they're waterproof if things do get wet. Um, we transport you from Queenstown to the start. If you need transport for your ride, we that, and also at the very end of your ride to either Dunedin or to Queenstown. We spend a bit of time briefing you at the beginning of the ride because it's really important to us that you have a great time and that you see everything. People come and want to do the trail in 2 days and just head down going for it. And they come back and you say, "Did you see this? No. Did you see this? No. Did you do this? No." And so they're really what we have to offer. We're always around. So vehicles, you might not see them, but they're passing one or two or three today. So if there's a problem with a bike, or if someone, for instance, in the group doesn't want to ride that particular day, they can be moved with the bags to the next night's accommodation and skip that. I guess the day you wouldn't want to skip would be the second day, where all the tunnels and viaducts are, or the main thrust of those are, and that's probably the most scenic part of the ride. And yeah, so that's the trips, the bikes. You can see there, have partnered with Cinch. So if you're Australian or New Zealander, will know of Avanti bikes. Cinch are actually the Avanti family. So if they've got a different for this for these bikes. Um, they've sat down with us, talked to us about what we bike or what clients would like in a bike. So we've worked on eventually building a bike that suits both our clients and these trails. We stand so I guess 10% of the bikes, 15% of the bikes going out each day, not each day, but over the course of the would be standard or normal bikes. Some people might call them analog bikes. They all come with carriers, or hydraulic brakes. And we take we get a lot of people that haven't ridden 20 years. So we actually, we spend some time with you before you go off on your trip, just making sure that you've got the handling of the bike and the use of the bike right. And that's just riding the bike probably is correct for 90%, but there's always that need some extra hand holding at the beginning. So if I just dive off again so that picture shows you pretty limited range of. This is more our range. Oh, come on. Sorry, we have a glitch. Here we go. This is more our range here. We've got mountain bikes as well, Scots and Marins. They're 24, 27 speed and 11 speed. Comfort bikes are both 11 and 27 speed. We do have dual suspension, both low step or step through and standard frame, so more this frame. Same with the e-bikes, we have that type of frame. We have kids bikes, 24-inch, 20-inch through to it should be 26-inch. Amazing how many little kids actually do this trail on a 20-inch bike. It's really seen come back. We can cater for little kids, babies, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds. We have the car seats. They're all catered for as well. Tandems. You'd be amazed at how many times a husband and wife want a tandem and then go for a quick ride and come back and want a bike each. And then the recumbent e-trike. So we tried to help families that might have someone in the family who disabled and might be a paraplegic, for instance. So this bike enables the group to ride. I'm going to talk today mainly about the three itineraries that we've got here. The 3-day itinerary, a 4-day and a 5-day. The 4-day itinerary is probably the most popular. We used to do a 5-day on the rail trail, and we still do, but it's for those people who want a very small amount each day in terms of distance. For families with little kids, it's probably more suited. So, but this would be the most popular trip. The 5 day, we have added Lake Dunstan on the trail. And so you would come from Queenstown, stay in Clyde. We take you up to Cromwell, you ride Dunstan, another night in Clyde, do some wineries, and then carry on through the rail trail through to Middlemarch. And we can do that in reverse as well.